I'm here with composer Andy Akiho, also wonderful percussionist, and we're here to talk about Seven Pillars, which was just nominated for not one, but two Grammy Awards. Welcome, Andy, and congrats on the nominations.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Did you have any idea that this recording was going to get Grammy nominations, or did you ever dream that in your wildest dreams? I mean, I know there's a ways to go before they actually announce or not, but just getting the nomination, it's got to feel good, right?
Very good. I wasn't expecting it at all.
Yeah. Now let's talk about Seven Pillars, because in listening to this work, it's so inventive. I mean, it's 80 minutes long, but it's so imaginative. Like a lot of your other work, it's got a lot of precision, a lot of humor. Sometimes it's a little scary, you know. I'm wondering, like, how much does the music of Andy Akiho equate to who Andy Akiho is? I mean, how closely are you aligned with what it is that you create?
It's 100% me. I mean, it's more me than I'm me.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? More you than you?
Yeah, sometimes I have trouble communicating what I'm trying to say or do. With the music, it feels more natural because I have time to complete my thoughts and to put it out there. And I know it's more abstract, obviously, than even conversation and everything, but it's truly who I am.
Yeah.
On a very personal level, and for the musicians I work with. So this can't be more Sandbox and my relationship with them and knowing them. I'm already like that with everything I write, and this piece is that to the 100th. It's times 100 because they let me do that. They let me make this piece in a way that works. That a lot of times I don't get that opportunity just for logistical reasons. It's not. I don't think people don't want to let me do that. It's just whether it's deadlines or just logistics or scheduling, all that kind of stuff. We got to do a lot more with this piece than I normally get to do in creating it.
Well, and creating it, now talk a little bit about the creative process. There's creating it, and then you went back and recorded it while the pandemic was going on. So that obviously affected, the process. Let's go back to the beginning. And what was the genesis of Seven Pillars, and how did you start to formulate that?
So talks about this go back as far as 2012. And I started writing the piece in January 2013. And this was for a different group. But Ian Rosenbaum was in that group. They only formed for a little while. This group was called Time Travelers. Svet Stoyanov, Ayana Katoko, Ian Rosenbaum, and Gwen Deese. And they just wanted to commission a standalone piece for their super group. They were like a super group of percussionists. And as I started writing that piece in January 2013, I had a very limited number of instruments where I was working on. I was working on at Princeton University, and they had, I had one marimba, one vibraphone. I set up everything and started working on that. And when I was working on this standalone piece, I was like, man, I want to write an entire evening length concert. Now I was really inspired. And from back then I was thinking of this. And then I started writing a glockenspiel solo and what became Pillar 4, another movement that became Pillar 4. And I knew that was going to be the middle movement of 11 movement piece that might happen 50 years from now. I didn't know if I'd ever get the commission to do the other ones, but I was like, okay, I'm going to write this. And I know that it's going to be one thing. And I want to have movements on either side of this one day, whether they're individual commissions one day or it's a full thing. So after wrote that. I finished that because I was writing other things too. I finished that and I finished it in Rome in 2014, in the fall. And they ended up premiering this. That group ended up premiering it, I believe, not until 2015 or 16. I think 2016. But Ian had already formed Sandbox with Victor and Terry and Johnny. And he kept talking to them about me and the piece and all this and this dream that we had to do this one day. And then somehow he talked them into doing it. And then they got the commission together. And then starting around 2018, we really kicked it into high gear.
Yeah.
That's the genesis. That's
just right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's just a start, but there's so much there. If I were like a fly on the wall as some of those sessions that you did up at, what was the name of the place where you guys went, sort of an area where you could do 24/7 just working on this piece? Yeah. Avaloc, right? Avaloc Farm Music yeah.
Institute. Avaloc Farm Music Institute.
So you spent time there.
A lot of time there. So that was stage 2. And,
okay.
And
so we're continuing the story, right? You go to stage 2, you guys are making this happen. You know, you've already written pillar 4, you've got an idea of the structure. What's the process in creating stuff? I mean, are you making new instruments? Are you thinking in terms of color? Are you know, I'm trying to get a little bit under the surface of the composing process here for you.
Yeah. So then, all right. So still just part of the formulating process. And then we can go deep in details in the music if you want. All right. So in 2018, I somehow talked them into going with me to Avaloc without writing any music. So I think they believed that when we got there, they would have a bunch of music to try to rehearse and I would coach them through that. I just went there to kind of meet them for a month. So we worked on actually older pieces I'd written, not even percussion pieces. Some we kind of arranged for percussion. And we did 4 music videos. We actually really worked on pillar 4. So I was thinking how, you know, I wanted to really get to know the other 3 because I knew Ian really well. So we went there for about a month and worked really late every night. And I started coming up with ideas, but I didn't really do much with them on the new ideas. It was more like, okay, how do you interpret my older stuff? And then let's get to know each other for about a month. And I could have crammed and like really wrote a lot of music then, but I didn't. And I was like, okay, now I know their personality. I know how to write for them. I'm thinking about their solos and stuff like that. But I'm also a percussionist, so I know how I can introduce new things that I know they can handle, but they might not have been introduced to before. And then that combination, and then also them with me, like I'm learning a lot about them, you know what I mean? And through their personality, it's inspiring a lot of material already, you know, subconsciously. So then we go back, that was 2018. We go back again in 2019, and I'm already starting to come up with things. And ideas, and we were there for another 3 weeks or so, and we worked like crazy there. I'd go to coffee shops with them, writing there, and then come back. We'd work from midnight till 5 a.m. sometimes, and a lot of times I would just set up things and then just start improvising or coming up with techniques and stuff, and then being like, "Yo, can you try this?" And then they would go through it and try these new techniques. For example, like the bowing fast on vibraphone. Like, how do we mimic more things that strings can do? Because a lot of times when you bow on a vibraphone or a crotale, it's like a sound effect. I mean, or it's like a atmospheric thing. I wanted to get really articulate with it. So, for example, we messed around with that, and then different techniques with the vibraphone, and then also setting up Victor's setup, which is a bunch of found sounds. So kept building upon the pillar 4 found sound setup with 4 hanging non-pitched pipes, 5 glass bottles, like whiskey bottles and stuff, empty because we were there so long, and then wood blocks and stuff like that, a kick drum. His is pretty much a found sound setup. So I would just improvise over that, come up with material, record it on an iPhone, hours. I'm talking hours and hours. And then I would, teach a lot of it by rote. or we come up with ideas like, all right, play this 5 times. Okay, now you play that. So certain movements, they even learned one part and then ended up orchestrating it for another. I'd be like, oh, Terry, you do actually, Ian, you do this part on the marimba. Let's try that out. And then, by the time they learned it, by the time I handed them the score, they already knew all the vocabulary. Obviously, they had to memorize all the intricacies and stuff, but they knew the backbone of a lot of these movements before they even got the scores. And so then when they were learning it, memorizing it as they were learning it. And so then it was never this struggle to, like, they were so used to reading it and then performing it 100 times and then trying to learn it. They're learning it as if we were like a rock band working in the garage, you know, or being down in Trinidad and learning everything by rote. And I've always felt that brings a different kind of musicality and interpretation to the music. I mean, it's super intricate too. There's no, you know, like, as they were learning it, it might be like a cell or something that you repeat for 30 minutes, you know, just so we can, like, get it in our blood, that kind of thing. But then when they get the music, it's super intricate. There's all these, you know, even within the patterns, it never repeats or something. But once they see the architecture of it, they memorize it so well because it's already in their blood. They did it months or almost a year ago. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can hear the discipline and you can hear the precision in the performances. They're all very, very secure. And obviously it's paid off. I mean, the recording itself is beautifully capturing the sounds of these instruments, and it's so well played. Can you talk about the, well, a couple of things I want to mention. I want to mention the structure of the piece, because these pillars, there are 7 pillars and then 4 solos, one for each of the members of the percussion quartet, right? And it's arranged like a palindrome kind of setup. Can you explain that for us?
Yes. So pillar 4 was the one I wrote originally, right in the middle. Just keep that in mind. Pillar 4, even though it's 7, right? So that's also the longest movement. That's about 11. If you play it at tempo, it's about 11 and a half minutes.
Yeah.
On either side of that is 1. So pillar 1 is the very first thing. That's all 4 percussionists. Then you have the solo, the first solo that's introduced. That's Johnny Allen's solo. It's called Amethyst. It's for solo vibraphone. So going back to pillar 1 in the structure. Pillar 1, there's no pitch material. There might be a pipe here and there, but it's not about the pitch that it makes. It's all drumming, like just raw drumming, you know, and that had a lot of my drum line roots, like being in drum corps and stuff like that. So pillar 1, then Amethyst with Johnny's solo, and that introduces the vibraphone, also introduces the more melodic harmonic materials. It's like the ballad of the album, you know. And then pillar 2, that introduces Kratali comes in, and the vibraphone, now that the vibraphone's been established, which the instruments usually are entered through the solos. So then we have vibraphone and Kratali's, but it's really treated almost like one sound world that is a crescendo of articulation. That's the one with all the bows. Starts out very atmospheric, and then it gets extremely articulate by the end of the piece. Then there's pillar 3, and that really introduces Victor's setup, the tuned metal pipes. He has 21 tuned metal pipes, but in pillar 3, he uses 9 of them, and it's only 6 pitches, but 9 pipes. Kick drum, a cigar box, piece of metal, bottle, those kind of things. That's what, and pillar 3 is more like groove based, really intense rhythms and melodic material, right? And then so we're on pillar 1, Amethyst, pillar 2, pillar 3, and then Spiel, which is for Glockenspiel, but it's also
means game in German,
yeah, it's like, just it's like a monologue for Terry on solo Glockenspiel, and he goes crazy on it for about 8 minutes, and that introduces the Glockenspiel.
Yeah, it sounds like he has more than 2 hands, actually, when you listen to it.
I think a lot of people didn't realize that was just a solo, because he's such a super.
Right. I didn't get it until I read the notes. I thought it was more than one person.
Yeah,
the Glock. Yeah,
he's going crazy on the Glock. Yeah, and then so that introduces the Glock, and now we're at the pillar 4. That, Terry's movement's almost like Lucky and Waiting for Godot, like that big monologue. or
Yeah.
soliloquy. I almost called it soliloquy, but that's that movement. And then pillar 4, Glockenspiel kind of leads it, but it's more in chill mode because he just said everything he could possibly say ever. And then so pillar 4 is what the Spiel, and pillar 4 was what I was thinking of back in 2013. So there's this huge gap of like 7 years, 6 years or whatever before I got to the other stuff. Then after pillar 4, we're on the other side of the palindrome, right? So you got 1 solo, 2, 3 solo, pillar 4. Then the next solo is Ian's solo, and it's called Marimba with aria capitalized. And finally we're introduced to the low end because we've been dealing with crotales, metal pipes, vibraphone. You know what I mean? It's been very ringy and overtony. Now we get the ground. We're grounded with Ian's solo. It's called Marimba, but you wouldn't know maybe on the album, but it also introduces the vibraphone too. Not introduces, it also has vibraphone on one side. So he's playing the bowing a lot, playing a lot in low notes, the low octave of the 5-octave marimba. So now you're getting the warmth, right? And the earthiness. And then we get to pillar 5, and that's kind of that evil. It's like we call it evil Kara Kurnai. Kara Kurnai is another piece I have with this ostinato. And then now we got this, Kara Kurnai is like in 31. I think pillar 5's in 25 or something. And it repeats every 5 bars of 5/4. But so that's like it was the very rhythmically ostinato-y thing. And it really puts marimba in the mix of all the other ones. Then we have pillar 6. That's like the deep cut, kind of little out, but more in that academic-y, percussion-y world. I think it's what it reminds me of, but it's hidden as all the architecture, everything kind of in there. It's really deep, but it might not be the most immediately appealing. But I wanted a deep cut like that. And that one actually I wrote all alone without them at all. I wrote that in Portland during the pandemic. But I knew it was going to be that kind of movement even when I hung out with them. I was feeling it out. And then it's Cartograph, and it spells trap. Cartograph is the final solo, and that's Victor's solo. And that's the first time he plays all of it set up. All the hanging pipes, all the 21 chromatic pipes, the kick drum, the metal pitcher, the bottles, the wood blocks, everything. That's Victor's huge solo. And I wanted it to be like if you go to a rock concert in the 80s and people are going crazy over the drum solo. It's like absurdly too many notes and too much, but it's fun because it's rock and roll. That's Victor's solo. And then we have pillar 7 to round it off. And then pillar 7 incorporates everything, like a typical finale kind of thing. But it also is the most melodic. It's very nostalgic, and it's a crescendo of energy, So it might be, it might not, if you start the piece, you really got to give it a chance and listen all the way through, by a minute. But also back to the architecture, pillar 1 and pillar 7, you can literally put on top of each other. They're the same amount of beats until the coda of pillar 7, because there's that little extra for the end of the show thing. But basically it's the same thing. Even though pillar 1 has no pitch material, nothing like that. Pillar 1 and 7 really are mirrors. And then pillar 2 and pillar 6 are mirrors, kind of. They use the same scale, this scale that goes, I don't know, over 31 notes or something like that. And they're exactly 5 minutes long. They're both at 120, but the way it doesn't sound anything kind of alike, but they are architecturally, they're very parallel. And 3 and 5 are very parallel, even though 3's in 13 and 5's in 25 or whatever. Rhythmically, they're very parallel. They only use 6 pitches, the same 6 pitches of a hexatonic scale. And then pillar 4, Spiel, and Marimba are all the same scale. And they kind of live in their own world, the core right in the middle. You got the high end, you got the middle longest movement, and then you got the low end with the marimba. They're all connected. They round that out, that center,
Yeah, I love hearing you talk about this stuff. I mean, there's a lot going on underneath the surface, but just as a listener, when I listen to it, it's a fairly easy listen. I mean, it's really interesting and engaging. It seems like it works on 2 levels. There's like the meditative kind of zoning out level where you let it just wash over you. And then there's the other engaging kind of level where you hear it and you think, what was that? What was this? I want to hear that again, right? So I kind of go back and forth between those two states of listening. But for 80 minutes, I mean, for an evening length work, it moves pretty quickly. And I've heard a lot of percussion pieces that just slow down to a halt, but yours definitely takes a different tack. Can you talk a little bit about the actual recording? Because I know you guys were set to do a performance in front of an audience, and then we had the pandemic, and you decided to shift gears and lay it down on recording.
Yes, I mean, that was, as unfortunate as the pandemic was, and our first big show being canceled, like we were really excited. They had sold out of these performances at the Mondavi Center in UC Davis. And we were really excited about that because this was the biggest venue for them that they've done, or the biggest profile kind of concert. And it was just, this was a dream. And that was going to be in April last year, 2020, right? And I was about to put it into high gear cram mode to get to that. So because that got canceled, they didn't even get rescheduled. It just got straight up canceled because nobody knew what was going on, right? We were like, okay, we don't know how long this pandemic's going to last, when concerts are going to start back up. And we're like, let's do our dream project with this. I mean, it was already a dream project, but how do we take it to a new level? And I've never had the opportunity to really have the production quality of some of my stuff done at the highest level because of time, and I'm already moving on to the next piece. So we were like, okay, let's record this thing. And I always wanted to record classical music more like pop or a rock band. That way we really have control over the mix, the panning, the clarity, everything. So you can hear it as if you're really part of the ensemble and you're already engaged in something that's been played for 50 years or something. I wanted to capture that before we even did the first performance. And we were hyped to do that. And at first, I think Ian knew me, so he knew how I wanted to work with and I think the other three at first, I mean, they're so nice that they'll hear us out. So Ian and I were like, hey, can we do this way? Because I think they were so used to being like, okay, we're going to work on something, play it a trillion times till we have it perfected and then record it. Even if it's perfect, you can't get this kind of sound on a recording the way we were going for. Like, because for example, with one person, even sometimes I would have it in the left ear, or we would do that, put it in the left ear and then throw it over to the right. You can't do that if it's all four playing together. Even if you mic it, you can get away with a lot, but you can't get away with that extreme clarity. And then also they were learning it. So they were learning a lot, even in the studio. It's more like when it's not quite like this, but Miles Davis comes in with So What or something, or, kind of blue and just handing scores. It's not quite like that, but it's that spontaneity of being in the studio and having that full control. And then we got Sean Dixon, somebody I've known since I moved to New York. We got him, and not because he's this great engineer, mainly because he's one of my best friends and he's like a brother to me, and I know he has good ears. And even though he lacked, and he didn't, I don't think lacked, he had different experience of recording. He never completely produced something like this. And it was a lot to ask. And I was like, man, we got to I know you're not getting paid as much as you should and as much as you're about to put the work in, but we got to do this. I mean, he still got paid and everything, but I was like, it needs to sound like $1 million. Like whatever we do, you had to be the Rick Rubin of this kind of album. You know what I mean?
Well, it does sound, it sounds amazing, I have to say. And
yeah, we worked hard.
It feels like you're right in the middle of the ensemble. I mean, it feels very intimate. You hear instruments so clearly and so crisply. And I sat there and listened to it, and I was thinking, where is the mic? How did they do this? Because it's really, really well recorded. Anyway.
A lot of it was experimentation. That's what I'm saying. Working with somebody as flexible as Sean, and he has great ears, and working with his experience, because he's done more, in hip hop and pop and jazz and West African, he's done more those kind of vibes. So getting his influence in on that, and he's an amazing drummer. We've been playing together for almost 20 years now. amazing drum set player. So he's got that pocket. So he's listening for the rhythm and the feel too. And we did a lot of experimentation, where to place the mics, even recording things, and then sometimes re-recording it several months later because it just didn't work in the room it was in or the mix. Doing that and doing a lot with post,
Yeah.
After doing the editing and all that rigorous stuff, like really being creative with the mix and stereophonic panning, right? Trying to get that 3-dimensional space, even within the instruments, but also in the macro with all 4 instruments. Or even if it's a solo, like where are we going to place, the different registers or instruments, right?
So this also has movies associated with it. You've got other collaborations. Can you just tell us about those artistic collaborations?
Yeah, you're asking all the good questions because I forgot to mention all that when you were talking about the pandemic and having that extension. Like that's a huge part of it. Not only did we want to do the recording and extend the production quality of that, we wanted to hire 11 directors to create these films. And then just kind of give them a rough idea of the architecture, but not overly think it and how they would respond, because they're going to come at it from a whole new unique angle than we would personally, right? Because we're so in it, sometimes we can't see the big picture. And also not just that, we want different personalities, different, all kinds of really creative minds that would come in and put their input on it. Choreographers, dancers, directors, designers, everything. And then a huge thing to more on this is the live show working with Michael McQuilkin. I'm only bringing him up because he crossed over between being a director, kind of overseeing the film project, and then directing Pillar 7, but also directing the live show. And I'm sure you might have asked about this in a little bit, but it kind of ties into this. So between having all the 11 directors bringing their personalities and their innovation. So we did anything from, like I said, dance, but also stop animation, and then even acting. Pillar 4 is, and we might even have a whole film of just the pillars. That's a silent film, and then and that's Alexandra Kochev, like she's gonna rock that, I think. And then but all the films, and they're also kind of built into the structure. But then Michael McQuilkin also designing the live show, and that was amazing this past weekend, hearing that, because he designed all these lights. There's 7 pillar lights. There's 7 of these things, and they're moving throughout the stage, and they're completely 100% controlled by the quartet. So I'm talking, they're pressing these things a 30-second note before the beat for the delay of the Bluetooth from an iPad going to these 7 pillars that are moving around while they're playing a trillion notes, and then hitting these buttons of all this choreography that Michael Joseph McQuilkin put on this iPad in different patterns and color schemes, and it's way cooler than that sounds. I'm not giving him enough credit for how genius he is on thinking of this. And he's an awesome drummer too, a musician. So he really gets my style. And he's also done a lot. He's directed a lot of my music videos. Most of my music videos have been directed by him. So we've been working together for almost a decade. And also he's been working with Sandbox and Ian. So him to come in and bring this show, it just takes it up a whole nother notch. And because they have all the music memorized, they can memorize all the choreography. Like they're spinning around instruments, and that, all these kind of fun things that it creates a live show. It creates the experience. It's not just a concert,
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, just I'm getting exhausted just listening to everything that they have to do to make the music happen, and to make the videos happen. I imagine it's a real tour de force for the performers to put this out there. It's
pretty amazing. I mean, I was exhausted after, because we did 2 shows 2 nights in a row for Emerald City Music. That was official world premiere. They did a preview concert at PASIC, Percussive Arts Society in Indianapolis, mid-November, and then this was the official premiere for the public. The world premiere was Seattle, December 3rd and 4th. But they did 2 shows on the 3rd, and I just can't believe their energy. Like I used to do stuff like that with drum corps. Like we kill it for 10 or 11 minutes on the field. And it's like, you know, your heart rate's up. It's like you're running a marathon for 10 minutes. They did it basically for 80 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, twice. They had a quick break in between the first show, and then because of COVID protocol, they didn't want to overpack, so they ended up doing 2 shows per night.
Wow.
They did it in Seattle, then they did it in Olympia the next night. By Olympia, I was exhausted. I wasn't even playing. Just the mental energy.
But they have you as a cheerleader, and I imagine your enthusiasm is pretty infectious.
Yeah, I mean, they don't need me for that, but it's fun to, you know, I'm always trying to hype them up too. Even though they're fine without me. I mean, this because, you know, we've got so much history in this. That's why I'm never nervous.
Yeah.
There's no nerve. I don't think any of us are nervous, because not because this false sense of confidence, is because really it's like they're brushing their teeth or walking to the store. You just don't mess that up.
You've done the work.
They've been doing it so many times. And even if something messes up, you're right in the zone with it. There's gonna be, and that makes it fun too. That's gonna be, you know what I mean? They're at a level to where nobody freaks out if one of the lights doesn't work right or something, even though we were really lucky and everything kind of went so smooth. I've never had performances go that smooth, like 4 in a row. It was amazing. And I mean, Sandbox, you know,
it's all the preparation and all that went into it that puts it where it is right now. I'm so glad we have this album, though. 7 Pillars by Andy Akiho. And Andy, I want to thank you for joining me. It's with Sandbox Percussion. You can find this album pretty much anywhere, especially now that you have 2 Grammy nominations for it. It's in everybody's mailbox, but you can find it at all the usual suspects as well for purchase or download. Andy, I could go on talking about this for a long time because there's a lot packed into this fantastic music, but I'm really grateful that you took some time out to talk to us about it.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to be here and speak with you and the station about this. Thank you so much for inviting me.